Many people are driving around on recalled tires, never realizing they're in danger.
6 tire recalls hit American drivers in the last 7 months. One covered 37,000 tires. One covered tires already mounted on brand new Chevrolet EVs rolling out of the factory. And the reason almost nobody noticed is the same reason your next blowout won't be a surprise to the manufacturer. It'll be a statistic they already knew about. Here's the paradox. Every tire sold in this country passes the same federal safety test. The cheap one and the expensive one both get a government stamp. But passing and keeping you alive in a highway lane change at 70 miles an hour are not the same thing. And the gap between those two is exactly where these recalls keep happening. I spent the last few weeks pulling federal crash data, the newest independent lab testing, and the actual satisfaction numbers tire owners report after the honeymoon period ends. Out of 10 major brands sold across the US right now, only 2 land at the top of every single category that matters. The rest range from fine with caveats to under active federal recall as you're hearing this. I'm going to tell you exactly which ones to avoid, which ones are quietly excellent for less money than you'd expect, and the one number, cost per mile, that the tire industry hopes you never calculate. Stick around for the full 10, because the worst one on this list is sitting on driveways in every state right now. The problem nobody advertises. Your tires are the only part of a 2-ton vehicle actually touching the road. Brakes, airbags, lane assist, all of it is irrelevant if 4 patches of rubber the size of your palm lose grip at the wrong moment. And right now, several major brands have tires on the road under active recall for the most dangerous failure mode that exists, tread separation. Tread separation means the outer layer of the tire, the part with the grooves that actually grips the road, physically peels away from the tire body while you're driving. At highway speed, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is blunt about what that does. It can cause sudden loss of vehicle control and a significant increase in crash risk. This isn't a hypothetical. In the past year, Toyo and Nitto recalled nearly 37,000 tires because a contamination issue during manufacturing weakened the adhesive holding the tread to the casing. Goodyear issued a separate recall on its Eagle F1 Supersport line for the same failure mode, tread peeling from the casing. Kumho is in the middle of a tread separation recall right now, with replacement notices going out to owners. And Firestone recalled a batch of Destination LE3 tires because an internal support component was out of position, undercutting durability. But here's what makes this worse than it sounds. A recall only catches the tires a manufacturer already knows are defective. It says nothing about which brands are simply, structurally, year after year, weaker performers. The ones that will never trigger a recall notice because nothing is technically broken, they're just mediocre by design. That's the bigger story, and it's the one the rest of this video is about. I pulled data from 3 places. Consumer Reports 2026 brand rankings, which scored 18 major brands across 129 tested models on a 100-point scale, the Federal Recall Database, and Real Owner Satisfaction, surveys collected after people had lived with their tires for a full year, not just driven them off the lot. The picture that emerges is not subtle. A small number of brands dominate almost every category. A larger group of household names, yes, ones you've heard of, consistently land at the bottom of owner satisfaction. Let's start with who to avoid. Before we get into the 10, hit subscribe, because brand number 1 on this list is sold at nearly every major retailer in the country, and there's a real chance it's on your car right now. Here's a name that surprises people. BF Goodrich carries real engineering pedigree, off-road tires, racing heritage, decades on the market. But in Consumer Reports' most recent all-season customer satisfaction survey, BF Goodrich landed in the red zone, grouped with budget brands most drivers have never even heard of. That's the gap between brand reputation and lived experience. A name can carry decades of goodwill from one category, off-road trucks, while its everyday all-season line quietly under-delivers for the daily commuter who never sees a trail. But here's what makes this worse. Satisfaction surveys capture the stuff that doesn't show up in a lab test. Noise that builds over 18 months. Wear that's uneven across the tread instead of flat. Ride comfort that degrades faster than the warranty mileage suggests it should. None of that fails a federal safety standard. All of it makes an owner feel like they overpaid for a name. At an average of roughly $200 per tire and a treadwear warranty in the 50,000 to 60,000 mile range, if real-world wear runs short of that promise, which is exactly what a bottom-tier satisfaction score implies, you're paying closer to half a cent per mile before you've even priced in an early replacement. But the next brand on this list isn't just disappointing, it has the lowest customer satisfaction score Consumer Reports recorded in its entire summer tire category. Sumitomo. Sumitomo didn't just score poorly. Consumer Reports found Sumitomo was the worst-rated tire brand for customer satisfaction in its summer tire category, and the brand landed at or near the bottom across all 4 satisfaction categories the survey covered. Not one weak spot, a pattern across the entire lineup. A single bad category in a survey is noise. A brand sitting at the bottom of all 4 is signal. That means whatever Sumitomo's engineering team is doing, it isn't translating into an experience owners want to repeat. And repeat business is the only metric that actually proves a tire performed the way it promised. But here's what makes this more than an inconvenience. A tire that disappoints across braking feel, noise, comfort, and wear simultaneously is a tire where the compound and construction were optimized almost entirely around hitting a low shelf price, not around the experience of the person driving on it every day, in the rain, at highway speed, for the next 3 years. Sumitomo tires typically retail in the budget tier, often well under $150 per tire. That low number is the entire pitch. But a tire that underperforms on wet grip is a tire that takes longer to stop your car when a kid runs into the street, and no satisfaction survey captures that risk until it's too late to matter. Number 3 on this list is a name most drivers genuinely don't recognize, which is exactly why it's dangerous. Kelly and Hercules budget lines. Kelly and Hercules both showed up in the red zone of Consumer Reports' recent satisfaction rankings, and both share something in common. They're positioned as the value alternative when a shopper walks into a tire store and asks for the cheapest option that technically qualifies as safe. Here's the part that should bother you. Every tire sold in the US, cheap or premium, has to pass the same federal motor vehicle safety standards: minimum braking, load capacity, high-speed durability. A $55 tire and a $200 tire both clear that bar. The bar is a floor, not a ceiling, and brands like Kelly and Hercules are built to clear the floor as cheaply as possible, not to perform above it. But here's what makes this the real conspiracy of the budget tire tier. It's not hidden, it's just never said out loud at the point of sale. The salesperson who sells you a Hercules tire isn't lying to you. They're just not volunteering that the same survey showing this brand in the red zone also shows specific premium and mid-tier brands outperforming it for $50 to $80 more per tire. A gap that disappears once you do the cost per mile math instead of the sticker price math. A budget tire averaging under $100 with a tread wear life in the 40,000 mile range works out to roughly 2.5 cents per mile. That sounds fine, until you put it next to what's coming in the winter section, because the gap is smaller than the price difference suggests and the safety margin is not. Number 2 on this list isn't a budget brand at all. It's a brand currently in the middle of a live federal recall. Kumho, under active recall. Kumho is, in some categories, a genuinely competitive mid-tier brand. That's part of what makes this one sting. But right now, Kumho is the subject of an active NHTSA recall for tread separation risk, with the company offering owners either a refund or a free replacement, and notification letters going out to registered owners. Tread separation again is the failure mode where the outer tread layer detaches from the tire body, and federal safety officials specifically flag it as a cause of sudden loss of vehicle control. This isn't a comfort complaint or a noise complaint, it's the failure mode that ends up in crash reports. But here's what makes this more troubling than a one-off defect. This is not Kumho's first tread separation issue, and tread separation recalls across the tire industry tend to share a root cause, a manufacturing process where the adhesive or rubber compound bonding the tread to the casing doesn't fully cure or bond before the tire ships. That's not a random defect. That's a quality control gap that has to be caught before the tire leaves the factory, not after it's already on 500,000 vehicles. If you're driving on Kumho tires right now, the math is simple. Check your tire's DOT code against the NHTSA recall lookup tool today, not next week. A free replacement costs you nothing. A tread separation at highway speed costs you everything. Which brings us to the worst brand on this entire list, and it's one almost every driver in America has had on their car at some point. Uniroyal. Uniroyal is owned by Michelin, the same company that makes the single best-tested tire brand in America, which you'll hear about shortly. And yet Uniroyal landed dead last in Consumer Reports' customer satisfaction rankings for all-season tires, and dead last again in the winter and snow category. 2 different seasons, 2 different use cases, same result, last place. That's not an accident of one bad model year. That's a brand positioned deliberately as the budget shadow of a premium parent company built to use the parent's manufacturing infrastructure to hit a lower price point, with the performance ceiling lowered to match. But here's what makes this the most important entry on this list. Most drivers who buy Uniroyal have no idea it's the budget arm of Michelin. They see Michelin owned in a 5-second glance at a tire store website and assume some baseline of shared quality transfers down. The satisfaction data says it largely doesn't, at least not in the way that matters once you're 3 years and 30,000 miles in. Uniroyal tires typically run in the budget to mid-range, often well under $150 per tire, competitive on price, which is exactly the trap. Last place in satisfaction, twice, across 2 different driving seasons, on a tire millions of Americans are currently driving on without knowing the name behind the name. That's the worst 5. Hit subscribe now, because the next 10 brands include the only 2 tires that scored at the top of every category Consumer Reports tracks, and one of them costs less than you'd think. Why passing isn't the same as safe. Before the winners, here's the bigger pattern connecting everything you just heard. Every recalled tire and every bottom-ranked tire still passed federal certification. That's not a loophole. That's how the system is built. Federal motor vehicle safety standards set a minimum bar: braking distance, load index, high-speed endurance. A tire either clears that bar or it's illegal to sell, but the bar was set decades ago as a floor for catastrophic failure, not a ceiling for performance. Consumer Reports lab testing, wet braking, dry braking, hydroplaning resistance, snow traction, ice braking, measures everything above that floor, which is exactly the territory where a $200 tire and a $60 tire stop being legally identical and start being functionally very different. The recalls you heard about earlier, Toyo, Nitto, Goodyear, Kumho, Firestone, all happened to tires that on the day they were manufactured met every federal standard. The defect emerged later, in adhesive bonds, and curing processes that don't show up until thousands of miles of heat cycling expose the weakness. Passing the test on day 1 tells you almost nothing about day 50,000. That's the entire reason cost per mile, not price per tire, is the only number worth trusting. A $200 tire rated for 80,000 miles costs about 1/4 cent per mile. A $60 tire rated for 40,000 costs roughly the same per mile on paper, but you're buying it twice, paying for mounting and balancing twice, and betting on a lower tier manufacturing process twice. Now, let's get to the 2 brands that are actually worth your money. The solid middle. Several brands land in genuinely solid territory without topping the chart. Continental's mainstream lineup, including the premium contact line, consistently delivers top-tier wet braking and handling in independent European testing, and its newest model won 3 of 5 major tests it entered in the 2026 season. Hankook earned specific praise as a value alternative. Consumer Reports has flagged the Hankook Kinergy XP as outperforming pricier competitors in most test categories for meaningfully less money. Bridgestone and Goodyear remain dependable all-season performers with long manufacturing track records, even with the isolated Goodyear recall noted earlier limited to a specific performance model. These are not the brands to avoid, they're the brands that prove the middle of the market is real. Solid engineering, fair pricing, no recall history on their mainstream lines, but none of them topped Consumer Reports' overall brand score. 2 brands did, and the gap between very good and best tested is smaller in price than you'd guess. But here's what makes the next 2 entries the actual headline of this video. One of them is a name almost nobody outside the tire industry has heard of: Vredestein. Vredestein, a Netherlands-based manufacturer that's been making tires since 1909, ranked 3rd overall in Consumer Reports' 2026 brand scoring with a score of 68 out of 100, and every single Vredestein model the organization tested earned its recommendation, not most, all 7. That consistency matters more than a single high score. A brand can get one flagship model into the best of list through marketing budget and a halo product. Getting every tested model recommended means the quality is structural. It's in the rubber compound and the manufacturing process, not just the top shelf product line built for reviewers. But here's what makes this the most underrated tire brand sold in America. Almost nobody outside the tire industry has heard of Vredestein, which means it isn't priced like a brand carrying decades of marketing spend. You're paying for the engineering, not the name recognition, and the testing data says the engineering is real. At competitive mid-tier pricing with treadwear performance ranking among the top tested brands, Vredestein owners are getting genuine top 3 engineering without the brand name markup, which on a cost per mile basis makes it one of the best values currently sitting on a tire shop's shelf, and now the only brand that beat it. Michelin. Michelin holds the #1 spot in Consumer Reports' 2026 brand rankings, with a score of 72 out of 100, the highest of any brand tested. All 8 tested Michelin models earned Consumer Reports' recommendation, every single one. Look at what that means side by side with everything else in this video. Uniroyal, Michelin's own budget subsidiary, finished dead last in owner satisfaction twice. The parent brand finished 1st overall, with a perfect recommendation rate across its entire tested lineup. Same corporate parent, opposite outcomes. That's not a coincidence. That's exactly what happens when a company builds one tier of product to win every test and a second tier of product to win on shelf price alone. The flagship Michelin Defender 2, the successor to the Defender, which built its reputation on a 100,000-mile treadwear claim, improved on wet weather performance while keeping that long life positioning, and it now carries Consumer Reports recommendations across multiple test categories. The Defender 2 posted the highest projected tread life of any tire in CR's most recent truck and SUV ratings, even while carrying an 80,000-mile treadwear warranty that undersells its own real-world performance. But here's what makes this the actual conspiracy at the center of the entire tire industry. Michelin knows exactly how to build a tire that dominates every lab test that exists. They've proven it repeatedly at the top of their lineup. The only question a tire company answers when it builds a budget line is how much of that capability to hold back to hit a lower price point. And that answer is the difference between everything you just heard in the avoid section and everything you just heard in this one. Premium Michelin tires run roughly $200 to $240 per tire. At an 80,000-mile warranty, that's a little over a quarter of a cent per mile, in the same range as the budget tires from Section 3, except without the tread separation recalls, without the bottom-of-the-barrel satisfaction scores, and with a perfect recommendation rate across every model tested. Here's what the data actually proves. The cheapest tire and the safest tire are almost never the same tire, but the cheapest tire and the most expensive tire per mile usually are. A budget tire that needs replacing twice as often after underperforming on wet braking the entire time you owned it was never actually the cheap option. It just front-loaded the cost so you wouldn't notice until the warranty ran out. Run the math before your next set. Divide the price by the treadwear rated miles, not the sticker price by itself. Michelin and Vredestein topped every category that matters. Uniroyal, Sumitomo, Kelly, Hercules, and BF Goodrich's all-season line did not, and Kumho has a live recall you need to check today. Have you had a tire fail before its warranty mileage, or found a budget brand that genuinely surprised you? Tell me which one in the comments. I read every single one. Next video, the oil filter that's contaminating fresh oil within the first 100 miles of your next change. You need to see it before your next service appointment.